The second meeting of the 62nd session of the Commission for Social Development is called to order. The President of the General Assembly, the Vice President of the Economic and Social Council, Under Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I am honored to welcome all of you to the 62nd session of the Commission for Social Development. Your presence here today is a testament to your commitment to social development. I would like to open this session by reflecting on this year's priority theme, which is fostering social development and social justice through social policies to accelerate progress on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to achieve the overarching goal of poverty eradication. Social development is at the heart of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The central pledge of the 2030 Agenda that no one will be left behind is grounded in a social perspective of development based on equity, social justice, and non-discrimination. The world is currently off track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by their 2030 deadline, and the number of challenges before us are indeed significant. We are witnessing new conflicts, escalating climate change, a cost of living crisis, entrenched inequalities, increasing mistrust, rising poverty, and widespread food insecurity. Concrete and concerted action is needed to change course and steer the world towards justice, trust, inclusion, security, and resilience. We must step up efforts to address gaps in core social services by promoting universal access to healthcare and social protection, along with quality education and decent work for all. A rights-based approach to social services and improvements in policy implementation are required to deliver quality services for all. There is also a need to expand critical infrastructure that enables access to drinking water and sanitation, electricity, and the internet. Increasing domestic investment in social policies through better tax collection and reprioritizing public spending are crucial, as well as strengthening multilateral cooperation. We must also promote integrated social, economic, and environmental policies if we are to achieve social development and social justice. In practice, social development and social justice require that economic growth is inclusive, that the jobs being created provide decent work, and that the benefits of the green transition, digital transformation, and other megatrends are shared equitably. Distinguished delegates, this Commission is tasked with promoting an ongoing global dialogue on social development, including new and emerging issues. This year's emerging issue will draw our attention to the influence of digital transformation on inclusive growth and development, a path to realizing social justice. Digital transformation presents many opportunities for accelerating social development, but also numerous challenges for ensuring that such development does indeed benefit all. Dear colleagues, during the first week of this annual session, we will have 6 panel discussions to address these issues. This afternoon, we will listen to a high-level panel discussion on the priority theme of this session. The discussion will focus on ways that social policies can become more effective in achieving inclusive, resilient, and equitable societies that leave no one behind. Tomorrow morning, the 6th of February, a ministerial forum on the priority theme will explore pathways for improving the mainstreaming of social considerations in development frameworks. On Wednesday morning, the 7th of February, there will be a high-level panel discussion on the 30-year anniversary of the International Year of the Family. Later, on Wednesday, a panel discussion on emerging issues will focus on this year's theme, which is the influence of digital transformation on inclusive growth and development, a path to realizing social justice. On Thursday, the 8th of February, we will have 2 panel discussions. The morning will be devoted to an interactive dialogue with senior officials of the UN system on the priority theme, focusing on pathways for improving the mainstreaming of social considerations in development frameworks. In the afternoon, a multi-stakeholder forum on the priority theme will be convened, focusing on good practice and innovative solutions in promoting social development and social justice. Distinguished delegates, the Commission's annual session is very timely. Last year, Member States reaffirmed their commitment to the Sustainable Development Goals. Now, the Commission is gathering to provide substantive expert advice and policy recommendations on social development and social justice to support the Economic and Social Council and Member States in their efforts to implement the outcome of the 2023 SDG Summit, accelerate progress on implementation of the 2030 Agenda, and prepare for a possible World Social Summit in 2025. I'm sure you'll agree with me that these are important tasks at this critical juncture. I am certain that with the commitment of all delegations, civil society organizations, and representatives of the United Nations system, we will successfully accelerate progress towards the overarching goal of poverty eradication and social development. Together, we will map out the path towards a more inclusive, just, and sustainable future. I thank you, and I look forward to a productive session. I now have the honor to invite the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Dennis Francis, to deliver a statement.
Your Excellency Ruchira Kamboj, Chairperson of the Commission for Social Development, Your Excellency Robert Ray, Vice President of the Economic and Social Council, Mr. Lee Junhua, Under-Secretary General of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, Ms. Jean Quinn, Chair of the NGO Committee on Social Development, Excellencies, dear colleagues. Thank you for the opportunity, indeed the privilege, to address the 62nd session of the Commission on Social Development. Today's theme, which focuses on social development, social justice, and efforts to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, could not be more opportune and, to be sure, more urgent. Let us be candid. We are not on track to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Our setbacks, evident even before the COVID-19 pandemic, have deepened amid converging global challenges, from conflict and climate change to debt distress, trade shocks, and fraying trust in institutions meant to represent, support, and lift societies. The result? A world that is fast losing the battle on poverty, hunger, and inequality, on quality education for all, on accessible and affordable health care, and on social protection systems, to name a few. Indeed, it is expected that a staggering 575 million people will live in extreme poverty in 2030. The state of global affairs behoves us to move beyond a business-as-usual approach. As the challenges evolved, we must accordingly adapt our approach and our solutions to ensure that they are fit for purpose. All of this, of course, was acknowledged at the 2023 SDG Summit, held here in New York in September, and it is for these very reasons that world leaders adopted the political declaration to accelerate implementation of this vital agenda. We must now do everything to ensure that this promise delivers real action. What does this mean? It means reorienting our approach to social policy, especially where it addresses the economy, employment, and the environment. A fragmented approach will not yield progress on social development. It means making strategic investments in peace, which is a prerequisite for sustainable social and economic development. It means closing the digital divide and empowering people everywhere through this era of digital transformation. We must embrace equitable and inclusive growth and development driven by shared innovation. And it means dismantling the structural barriers that conspire to leave people behind. But this can only happen if our policies, frameworks, budgeting, and legislation are socially just, conscious, and responsive to the fact that common circumstances have impacted and continue to impact people differently, creating and perpetuating inequalities. To close the SDG financing gap, we need innovative policy shifts that create a conducive fiscal space for SDG investments. We need cooperation and the alignment of international and domestic policies to capitalize on funds that may be available, especially through official development assistance, as well as domestic resources. Dear colleagues, building upon the outcomes of the 2023 SDG Summit, I urge member states to rally around actions that will give rise to meaningful gains. At the General Assembly, the inaugural Sustainability Week, which I will host in April, is one big opportunity. Through 5 high-level engagements, we will explore the challenges and opportunities for delivering sustainable solutions in tourism, transport, infrastructure, and connectivity, energy, and importantly, debt. I hope you will all join us in elevating this week and energizing its outcomes. The goal is to pave the way for the Summit of the Future in September of 2024, where world leaders are expected to accelerate action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals and to re-energizing the landmark consensus at the heart of the 2030 Agenda. I urge member states to use the Summit of the Future and its expected outcomes, the Pact for the Future, as well as the Declaration on Future Generations and the Global Digital Compact, if intergovernmentally agreed, to advance discussions ahead of the World Social Summit in 2025. Excellencies, the deliberations over the next 8 days are not taking place in a vacuum. They will feed into and augment other ongoing intergovernmental processes. We must join hands to rebuild trust and reignite solidarity. We must boost stakeholder engagement, and we must undertake the work of the Commission through a spirit of inclusion, cooperation, and collaboration. It was Nelson Mandela who reminded us that as long as poverty, injustice, and gross inequality persists in the world, none of us can truly rest. Unquote. With that, I wish you a productive session, and I look forward to the outcomes of your important deliberations. Thank you.
I thank the President of the General Assembly for his statement. I now invite the Vice President of the Economic and Social Council, His Excellency Robert Ray, to deliver a statement on behalf of the President of the ECOSOC, Her Excellency Paula Narvaez.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to join the Commission for Social Development in the opening of its annual session and I'm delivering these remarks on behalf of the president of the ECOSOC this year, Ambassador Paula Narvaez. As the president has reminded us this morning, ending poverty remains the main challenge for sustainable development. Urgent and innovative action is needed to achieve the goals and the targets of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The high-level forum to be convened under the auspices of ECOSOC this July will focus on this theme, reinforcing the 2030 Agenda and eradicating poverty in times of multiple crises, the effective delivery of sustainable, resilient, and innovative solutions. As the body that focuses on social development, your deliberations and decisions during this session will provide a very important input to this summer's forum, as well as the President has said, to the Summit of the Future and to the Pact of the Future, and to the promise of a social summit in 2025. The emerging issue that has been selected for this session, the influence of digital transformation on inclusive growth and development, a path to realizing social justice, is going to be an important introduction to these discussions. We all know that the ongoing revolution in digital technologies is rapidly changing the way we work, the way we play, and the way that we access services. We also know that digital technologies can increase access to social protection, to education, and to health care. And I'm going to say something that the chairman may I've said it last week and I'll say it again this week. And that is that India itself, the chair of this discussion, has shown that widespread access to bank accounts by means of cell phones can make social transfers happen in real time for not just a few million, but hundreds of millions of people who went from having no access to personal finances to having access to personal finances because of the decision by a government to say, this is something we are going to do, we're going to make it happen, and we're going to provide the means whereby it will take place. We also have to recognize that many other countries are following a similar path. But access to these exciting technologies is still uneven. The reason that I keep mentioning this example is because India is an example of a highly motivated, developing country that is rapidly joining the ranks of middle income and will soon, I'm confident, join the ranks of higher income. And it has done this not by virtue of relying on assistance from other countries. It has done it by determining that this is something it can move forward with itself. It's an extraordinary model for all of us to study and to learn from. At the special meeting of ECOSOC held in Santiago on the 23rd to 24th of January on the future of work, we heard very strong messages on the need for more decent jobs as a crucial response to poverty and deepening inequalities. Participants told us that we needed to look both to future demographic trends and technological innovation, while understanding that these technologies are not an end in themselves. It's not the cell phone itself. It's what the cell phone can do. It's what the technology can do. Whether it's a tool for good or a tool for not for good is up to us to decide. But we know that the technologies are a critical means to improve people's well-being, to improve their productivity, and, yes, to achieve the SDGs where we have fallen so far behind. The essential role of quality education and skills training was also highlighted at our meeting of ECOSOC last week, which was chaired by President Narvaez, while also emphasizing the imperative to close the digital divide, to promote just energy transitions, which support connectivity. Sessions highlighted specific actions to support those most vulnerable in the labor market, including women, young people, low-skilled workers, persons with disabilities, migrants, older persons, and Indigenous peoples, including through better access to social protection programs. Last week, most recently at ECOSOC, the Partnership Forum reiterated the crucial role played by effective partnerships in the pursuit of sustainable development as an indispensable mechanism for pooling resources and expertise, ensuring our efforts translate into tangible impacts on the ground, reinforcing the simple message that none of us can do it on our own, not governments, not the private sector, not NGOs. All of us must do it together. The coordination segment featured the very rich and diverse work of the ECOSOC subsidiary bodies, including the Commission for Social Development, and provided ideas and guidance for the work of the ECOSOC system and the UN system. Excellencies, building on these rich insights, together with you, I'm very much looking forward to the outcomes of this year's Commission for Social Development. While, of course, it is true that we have fallen behind on the SDGs, in good measure, because of the nature of the crisis that we've been facing over the last several years, it's important for us to look ahead to what is possible. In other words, to focus on what we can achieve, rather than simply berate ourselves for what we have not already done. Let's focus on the progress that's being made, scale up the best practices that we've seen, and achieve the impacts that our countries, yes, and our peoples expect of us. Personally, I remain optimistic that with renewed commitment, mutual solidarity, better cooperation, more coordination, breaking down silos, we can overcome our current challenges and develop policies and actions that will, in fact, deliver on the promise of an inclusive and a sustainable future. I thank you so much.
I thank Ambassador Bob Rae, the Vice President of the ECOSOC, for his statement. I now invite the Under-Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs, Mr. Lee Junhua, to deliver a statement.
Your Excellency, Ms. Rajira Kamboja, Chair of the 62nd Commission Session, Your Excellency, Mr. Dennis Francis, the President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency, Mr. Robert Ray, Vice President of the ECOSOC, Mr. Jean Quinn, the Chair of the NGO Committee on Social Development, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start by congratulating Madam Chair and the entire Bureau of the 62nd Session of the Commission for Social Development for diligent work in preparing the ambitious agenda before us. As your Secretariat, the Department of Economic and Social Affairs pledges its tireless energy in supporting your work towards a successful conclusion. We passed the halfway mark for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals with a clear lesson. We need to make a systemic shift towards a more inclusive, just, and resilient world. As the latest analysis of the global economic prospects shows that the gap between the developed and the developing economies is widening. While the unemployment rates in many developed economies have fallen below the pre-pandemic levels, many developing economies are struggling with the high unemployment. In most economies, wages growth failed to offset the impacts of the inflation and exacerbated the cost of the living crisis. The 2024 outlook is also bleak. Geopolitical tensions, tighter financing conditions, debt vulnerabilities, slowing trade, and persistent global warming threaten the social and economic progress. Excellencies, dear colleagues, those already furthest behind are bearing the brunt of the blow. In 2022, the number of the extremely poor reached close to 670 million globally, and some 735 million people suffered from hunger. Around 8.4 million people in low and middle-income countries died because of the poor quality health care. In fact, 4.5 billion people around the world lacked coverage of the essential health care services, and 4.1 billion people are excluded from any form of the social protection. Women and girls and the population groups already in vulnerable situations continued to be those left furthest behind. To undo this trend will require a fundamental shift that identifies and removes the barriers to the people's aspirations. The unjust exclusions tied to the race, ethnicity, gender, race, disabilities, and the socioeconomic status must be eliminated. This will require a policy approach that places the social development at the heart of all development actions, namely a people-centered approach. Member states alluded to this need almost 30 years ago at the World Summit for Social Development, when they adopted the Copenhagen Declaration and its program of action. And we have made much progress since then, but the need for a course correction is undeniable. The proposal by the Secretary General to host the World Social Summit in 2025 recognized the need for an action plan for social development fit for the 21st century. The summit would draw on the past lessons to advance the policies and measures that rebuild trust between the government and their citizens, and give the momentum towards achieving sustainable development goals. Distinguished delegates, realizing the SDGs will require the investments in people. We need to mobilize financial resources at the level that matched our social development ambitions, both through the domestic resource mobilization and international partners. The SDG stimulus aims to guide us towards this end. There are also opportunities to reprioritize public spending towards the social services and away from less productive and effective areas, including regressive subsidies on the fossil fuels and other harmful sectors. Ladies and gentlemen, at the SDG Summit, world leaders committed to taking continuous, fundamental, transformative, and urgent actions at all levels and by all stakeholders to overcome the crises and obstacles facing our world. It is now our collective responsibility to deliver on this promise. With your mandate to follow up on the Copenhagen Declaration and the program of the action, and to provide guidance from the social perspectives to implement the 2030 agenda, your deliberations in coming days will be critically important. I thank you.
I thank the Under-Secretary General for Economic and Social Affairs for his statement, and I will now give the floor to the Chair of the NGO Committee on Social Development, Ms. Jean Quinn, to deliver her statement.
Thank you, Ambassador Rishi-Gompoi. Ambassadors, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, thank you for inviting the NGO Committee for Social Development, many of them are here this morning with us, to be part of the opening of this commission. Today, more than ever, our society, our well-being and our future are threatened by social inequalities and multiple layers of injustice. Our social contract, underpinned by a societal moral obligation to each other, has been broken, resulting in increasing levels of extreme poverty and hunger, intersectional discrimination, profound gaps in social protection, persistent and devastating gender inequalities and disparities, economic instability, the climate crisis, the widening digital divide, global migration, the threat of nuclear war, the global cost of living crisis, and the care crises. These structural challenges have made every effort to achieve inclusive and resilient societies less effective, failing to deliver a sustainable future for all. Extreme poverty is increasing, as well as a deepening of the feminization of poverty. This is the moment to rethink our whole approach to society, to accept and implement social and sustainable change towards transformation. A disconnected and fragmented approach to social, economic, financial, and environmental policies has not produced the conditions to enable progress towards the eradication of poverty or the reduction of inequalities. We need leadership to establish a renewed social contract that integrates social, economic, financial, environmental, and political justice at both national and international levels. These are the pillars of international peace, prosperity, and security, as was stated in the Copenhagen Declaration of Social Development. The renewed social contract should focus on the following priorities: invest in human capital and ensure the dignity and well-being of individuals and families through transformative social policies and programs. Today, 1 out of 2 children will be born into extreme poverty globally. They will suffer multidimensional poverty, meaning they lack access to healthcare, education, proper nutrition, or adequate housing. And as a result, they experience multidimensional vulnerabilities and compounding risks which only push them further into vicious cycles of extreme poverty. Their lives depend on action. We need reform existing global financial structures based on solidarity to address global economic equalities. The child born into poverty today is only a reflection of inequitable investments by governments in social services. When we advocate for universal social protection systems and floors, we hear that national budgets are inadequate to accommodate that need. So we need a new financial architecture that provides for the well-being of all, because the system is unfit for today. We need an overhaul of the global trade system, debt restructuring, and fiscal policies that support the Sustainable Development Goals, eradicating poverty and reduce inequalities, including those based on gender. Financing for development cannot be considered in isolation. It needs to be clearly linked to its main purpose, which is the protection of basic human rights and the eradication of poverty. We need to ensure that all people have access to healthy and safe environments and fair protection from environmental hazards and risks. The children born into poverty today will not only be those impacted by climate change, but also those who will most face the consequences of inaction, which will be a problem to solve as those consequences become more severe. Intersecting environmental, economic, social, and cultural factors underlie both the challenges and solutions to climate change. People-centred institutions at the national and international levels are essential to monitor, enforce, and implement environmental law and protect the environmental rights of current and future generations. Fourthly, ensure that all persons are equal before and under the law and are entitled without discrimination to the equal protection and benefit of the law, which means the vast majority of children born into poverty today will lack the fulfillment of their basic needs due to their birth to the margins of society. People experiencing poverty have long been the subject of discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion. Rights enshrined in international law for almost 80 years remains unrealized for them, not only the right to development and the right to adequate standards of living, but also the right to political participation and legal protections. And so it is our call to action with those above considerations in mind, and the people that we encounter and accompany in our civil society organisations that serve in countries throughout the world, that we, the members of the NGO Committee on Social Development, call on you, our member states, to include people with lived experience of any kind in the design, implementation, and assessment of policy responses for effective and impactful incomes, to ensure equal access to affordable and adequate housing, to establish nationally owned human rights-based and well-financed universal social protection systems and floors, and prioritise and measure the well-being of people and planet using multidimensional indicators beyond GDP in policy making. We look forward to an outcome document for this session that will address these issues. We need a global process for engaging in a dialogue to accomplish this. The time is right for a second World Social Summit, as the Secretary-General called us to in 2025. We hope this will be among many steps taken in the future to redesign a social contract and build a more equitable, inclusive and just world, working together in solidarity and partnership for the common good of our humanity and Earth. The future of the planet is linked to the well-being of each person. And remembering the child born into poverty today deserves the hope of a future of prosperity without poverty. Against this backdrop, I am pleased to share with you our Civil Society Declaration Ambassador, which has been signed by over 1,000 individuals and organisations, in the hope that the declaration will be included as part of the outcome document of this Commission. And I'll end, as I always do, remembering the people we represent who say, "Don't talk about us without us." All people experiencing extreme poverty need to be included in this development of a renewed contract. And I thank you.
I thank the Chair of the NGO Committee on Social Development for her statement. We will now hear a statement by Ms. Muiza Muvovo, a youth advocate of the Global Youth Health Caucus of Copper Rose, Zambia, who will deliver her statement via pre-recorded video message. May we please play the video message?
Esteemed delegates, greetings from the heart of the Global South. My name is Muiza Muvovo, a voice of many young people from the Global South, deeply committed to advancing education, health, and technology intersections. With a background in leveraging technology for business transformation, education, and promoting health equity, I strive to harness innovation to address pressing social challenges and foster inclusive development. It's a profound honor to stand before you as a youth representative at the 62nd session of the Commission on Social Development, a gathering poised to bring about impactful change. In the context of this year's theme, encompassing social development, justice, policies, and digital transformation, the relevance of our deliberations intensifies. This theme embodies the very core of our collective responsibility. In the realm of our shared humanity, we confront the harsh realities of inequality, amplifying voices from the corners of forgotten communities. In regions where poverty casts a persistent shadow, social development becomes not just an agenda item, but a lifeline for millions. Our discussions must transcend rhetoric. They must architect tangible change. As we embark on this digital journey, we must recognize the uneven terrain it presents, especially in the landscapes of the Global South. Consider this stark reality. A significant portion of our population in underserved regions is yet to feel the transformative breeze of digital inclusion. This isn't just a data point. It's a profound chasm of missed opportunities and unfulfilled potentials. In the global south, where health and education intertwine with socio-economic challenges, the digital divide accentuates existing disparities. Here's a statistic that echoes the urgency. Over 60% of youth in Zambia lack access to essential digital resources, hindering economic participation and curtailing access to crucial information. Simply put, in a room of 10 young people, more than 6 lack access. From where I come from, I am considered privileged. Privileged because I can listen in and contribute to the deliberations being made here, even from miles away. Basic as it may sound, this stands as a minor representation of just how digitally excluded many young people in the global south are, starting from communication. It is a no-brainer that social and economic development, or the lack thereof, have immensely affected digital transformation and social development. As we navigate this digital frontier, let our policies be bridges over the digital divide. Let's not only champion access to technology, but harness its power for health and social justice. My plea is not just for connectivity, but for connectivity with purpose, where digital platforms reach the remotest corners, empowering communities with knowledge and care. Therefore, my recommendation echoes from the heart of this challenge. Let our pursuit of digital transformation be a path illuminated by inclusivity, equity, and most importantly, health, education, and social justice. Today, let us be architects. Architects of policies that reach the remotest corners. Architects of social justice that reverberates from villages to metropolises. As we deliberate, let the echo of our discussions be a promise to those whose dreams are yet to take flight, and a promise to sustain those that already have. I am Wiza Mworo, a voice of many young people. Thank you.
I thank the youth representative for her statement. I will now briefly pause this meeting to allow our distinguished speakers to take their leave and the podium to be rearranged for the next part of our program of work this morning. I now invite the Commission to resume its consideration of item 1 of its provisional agenda, election of officers in order to elect the remaining members of the Bureau. Dear colleagues, may I request you to please take your seats as we commence proceedings once again. Thank you. Members of the Commission will recall that during the first meeting of the present session, held on 15th February 2023, the Commission elected myself, Ruchira Kamboj, permanent representative of India to the United Nations, as chair of the 62nd session of the Commission. Re-elected by acclamation, His Excellency Yon Ivanovsky of North Macedonia, and elected also by acclamation Ms. Carla Maria Carlson of the Dominican Republic and Mr. Thomas Lama of Luxembourg as vice chairs of the 62nd session. Members of the Commission will further recall that during the same meeting, the election of the remaining member of the Bureau from the group of African states was postponed on the understanding that upon nomination by the regional group, the nominated member would be able to participate fully in the Bureau meetings in preparation for the Commission's 62nd session. I am pleased to inform the Commission that the group of African states has endorsed the candidature of Ms. Jocelyn Quishka, second counselor at the Permanent Mission of Burundi to the United Nations, as vice chair of the 62nd session. Concerning the election of Mr. Thomas Lama, counselor at the Permanent Mission of Luxembourg to the United Nations, since Mr. Lama subsequently completed his tour of duty in New York, the group of Western European and other states has nominated Ms. Stephanie Toschi, counselor at the Permanent Mission of Luxembourg, as vice chair of the 62nd session of the Commission. In the absence of any other nominations, may I take it that the Commission wishes to elect by acclamation Ms. Jocelyn Quishaka of Burundi and Ms. Stephanie Toschi of Luxembourg as vice chairs of the 62nd Commission of the Commission for Social Development. I hear no objection. It is so decided. On behalf of the Commission, I would like to congratulate Ms. Jocelyn Quishaka of Burundi and Ms. Stephanie Toschi of Luxembourg on their elections. I would also like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow Bureau members for their hard work and support in preparing this session. I also wish to inform the Commission that following consultations with the Bureau, it has been agreed that our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Stephanie Toschi of Luxembourg, will also assume the responsibilities of Rapporteur for this session. I congratulate Ms. Toschi on this appointment. I will now invite the Commission to begin its consideration of Agenda Item 2, entitled Adoption of the Agenda and Other Organizational Matters. The provisional agenda for the session is contained in document E/CN5/2024/1, and the proposed organization of work is before you in the annex to the same document. I invite the Commission to first consider the provisional agenda for this session as contained in document E/CN5/2024/1. The provisional agenda and the documentation for the 62nd session were approved by the Economic and Social Council in its decision 2023/328. May I take it that the Commission wishes to adopt the provisional agenda as contained in E/CN5/2024/1? I hear no objection. It is so decided. I now invite the Commission to turn to the proposed organization of work as contained in the annex to document E/CN5/2024/1. First, I will make a few general comments about the conduct of our work. I would like to see your cooperation in starting all meetings on time at 10 a.m. and 3 p.m. sharp to make optimum use of the conference resources allocated to the Commission. I would also like to recall the decision by the Bureau to shorten the time limits for statements in the general discussion, and I will make the following proposals here. Statements on behalf of groups shall not exceed 7 minutes. Statements by individual delegations shall not exceed 5 minutes. Statements by intergovernmental organizations and entities of the United Nations system shall not exceed 3 minutes, and statements by non-governmental organizations shall not exceed 3 minutes. Regarding the proposed organization of work, and as previously communicated through e-delegate in its resolution 78/245 on pattern of conferences adopted on 22nd December 2023, the General Assembly recognized the significance of the Lunar New Year and invited the United Nations bodies to avoid holding meetings on Lunar New Year. This year, in 2024, the Lunar New Year falls on Friday, 9 February. Accordingly, the Bureau of the 62nd session has decided to revise its draft program of work so as to avoid holding a plenary meeting on February 9th. The Commission will therefore continue its general discussions on Monday, 12th February at 10 a.m. May I take it that the Commission wishes to approve the proposed modalities and the organization of work contained in E/CN5/2024/1 as orally revised, on the understanding that further adjustments will be made, if necessary, during the session. I hear no objection. It is so decided. Following the approval of the proposed modalities and the provisional organization of work, I appeal to all speakers to adhere strictly to the time limits for statements during the general discussion. Importantly, a digital timekeeping device will be used during the statements of the general discussion to help keep the program on track. I thank you very much in advance for your cooperation. I also take this opportunity to remind delegations that the deadline for the submission of all draft proposals to the Secretariat is Wednesday, 7 February at 3 p.m. Regarding the joint general discussion under items 3A and 3B this session, I would like to propose a draft oral decision which reads as follows. The Commission decides, without setting a precedent for future sessions of the Commission for Social Development, that member states, observer states, intergovernmental organizations, as well as specialized agencies, related organizations, and civil society organizations may submit a pre-recorded statement which will be played in the conference room during the general discussion of the Commission for Social Development at its 62nd session. May I take it that the Commission wishes to adopt the draft oral decision that I have just read out? I hear no objection, and it is so decided. I now invite the Commission to begin its consideration of Agenda Item 3, entitled Follow-up to the World Summit for Social Development and the 24th Special Session of the General Assembly, and its sub-item A, entitled Priority Theme, Fostering Social Development and Social Justice through Social Policies to Accelerate Progress on the Implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to achieve the overarching goal of poverty eradication. Sub-item B, entitled Review of Relevant United Nations Plans and Programs of Action Pertaining to the Situation of Social Groups. And sub-item C, Emerging Issues, the Influence of Digital Transformation on Inclusive Growth and Development, a Path to Realizing Social Justice. The documentation under this agenda item is listed in today's Journal of the United Nations. I will now give the floor to Mr. John Wilmeth Officer in Charge and Acting Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, to introduce the documents under Agenda Item 3 and its sub-items. Over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. As the Acting Director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, it is my pleasure to introduce 3 reports of the Secretary General and 1 note by the Secretariat that were submitted to the Commission to inform this session under Agenda Item 3, follow-up to the World Summit for Social Development and the 24th Special Session of the General Assembly. The report contained in document E/CN.5/2024/3 is submitted for the sub-item 3A on the priority theme of the session, fostering social development and social justice through social policies to accelerate progress on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to achieve the overarching goal of poverty eradication. The report was prepared to inform your deliberations during the general discussion and to address topics that are relevant for the high-level panel discussion to be held this afternoon, for the ministerial forum tomorrow morning, for the interactive dialogue with senior officials of the UN system on Thursday morning, and for the multi-stakeholder forum to be held on Thursday afternoon. The report warns that despite significant progress over the past few decades, the world is failing in its commitment to foster inclusive development and social justice for all. Progress in many aspects of social development has slowed down since 2015, and for some indicators, progress has stagnated or gone in reverse since 2020, including for the fight to end poverty and hunger and to reduce inequalities. Public spending on social protection, healthcare, and education continues to be far from sufficient to provide all people with access to these basic services. In its recommendations, the report urges member states to apply a rights-based approach and to promote participation by the intended beneficiaries in the design, delivery, and evaluation of social policies to ensure universal access to healthcare, social protection, and quality education. The report calls on member states to step up domestic investments in social policies by broadening the tax base, by introducing or favoring progressive taxation, and by reprioritizing public spending. It urges member states to place social considerations at the heart of broader development frameworks and to strengthen the accountability, transparency, and capabilities of institutions. The report also calls for strengthening multilateral cooperation to support social spending through a sustainable and resilient international financial architecture. Lastly, the report calls for improved debt mechanisms and better cooperation on taxation, while also encouraging developed countries to follow through on their commitments for overseas development assistance, ODA. Madam Chair, I will now introduce the report of the Secretary General on the social dimensions of the new Partnership for Africa's Development, as contained in document E/CN.5/2024/2. The report reviews the socioeconomic progress and the challenges experienced by African countries in the current context of multiple global crises. It assesses efforts undertaken by African countries and their partners to achieve inclusive and sustainable development, and it highlights progress made in ensuring a coordinated implementation of the 2030 Agenda and the African Union's Agenda 2063. The report also discusses the potential impacts of the African Continental Free Trade Area, as the African Union has declared 2023 the year for accelerating the implementation of that treaty. In its recommendations, the report suggests that member states should continue to promote social progress in Africa by taking action in 6 key areas. 1, creating decent jobs for all. 2, ending poverty and hunger. 3, addressing the climate emergency through investment in clean energy. 4, implementing strategies for achieving gender equality. 5, mobilizing domestic resources for development. And 6, combating illicit financial flows and improving tax administration. Madam Chair, let me now turn to sub-item 3B, review of relevant United Nations plans and programs of action pertaining to the situation of social groups. For this sub-item, the Secretariat has prepared a report of the Secretary General entitled Preparations for and Observance of the 30th Anniversary of the International Year of the Family, as contained in document A/79/61-E/2024/48. The report focuses on demographic trends and their impacts on families and on the development of family policies. The report highlights the impacts of fertility and mortality patterns on families, emphasizing that evolving family structures and other changes necessitate responsive family policies, such as policies to address family-based care arrangements and intergenerational relations. In particular, the report the report emphasizes that demographic transformations should be acknowledged and addressed by policies that reflect an underlying ideal of intergenerational solidarity, seeking to ensure that all generations can benefit and are not being pitted against one another. The report draws attention to responsive policies that can help families to cope with increasing care responsibilities, while recommending the adoption of policies to support flexible working arrangements, parental leave, and affordable childcare. The recommendations also touch on family-based care systems for older persons, as well as institutional healthcare arrangements, especially for long-term care. The report also notes the need for investments in sites and activities that can be shared and enjoyed by all generations, and in multi-generational living arrangements. The report affirms that safeguarding access to sexual and reproductive health care and implementing family-friendly policies, especially in the workplace, are the best ways to ensure that people can achieve their personal goals and maximize their contribution to society. Further, the report describes the state of preparations for the 30-year anniversary of the International Year of the Family at the national, regional, and global levels, taking note of various expert group meetings and awareness-raising events at the regional level. Madam Chair, lastly, allow me to introduce the note by the Secretariat submitted for sub-agenda item 3C on emerging issues. The emerging issues theme for this year is the influence of digital transformation on inclusive growth and development, a path to realizing social justice. The note is contained in document E/CN.5/2024/4 and has been prepared to facilitate consideration of this sub-item, including for the interactive panel discussion scheduled on Wednesday afternoon. The note focuses on the opportunities and challenges that digital transformation presents for the achievement of inclusive economic growth, decent work for all, and social inclusion. It analyzes the multiple consequences that digital transformation can have on labor markets, financial inclusion, social policies, and persons living in disadvantaged or vulnerable situations. And it examines pathways for harnessing digital transformation to promote social justice. The note further explores policy options for promoting inclusive social transformation, highlighting the need to bridge digital divides, strengthen social protection systems, improve the governance of digital transformation, and intensify international cooperation. It concludes that governments must take action to steer digital transformation towards the promotion of social development and social justice, harnessing it to support the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, this concludes my introduction of the various reports and one note prepared for this session. I trust that you will find the information provided and the associated recommendations useful. I wish you fruitful deliberations throughout the session. Thank you.
I thank the officer in charge and acting director of the Division for Inclusive Social Development for his statement. I will now invite the Commission to begin its general discussion of sub-items A and B of Agenda Item 3. Before giving the floor to the first speaker, I would like to remind delegations to kindly respect the agreed time limits of 7 minutes for delegations speaking on behalf of groups, 5 minutes for member states speaking in their national capacity, 3 minutes for intergovernmental organizations and United Nations system entities, and 3 minutes for NGOs in consultative status with the ECOSOC. A digital speech timer is visible on the screen to assist the speakers in managing their time. I thank all delegates for their understanding, and I now have the honor to give the floor to Her Excellency Betty Amongi, the Minister of Gender, Labour and Social Development of Uganda, speaking on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. Minister, you have the floor.
Madam Chair, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the G77 and China. I would like to also extend greetings from the Chair of G77 and China, His Excellency Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, President of the Republic of Uganda. At the onset, Madam Chair, we congratulate you and members of the Bureau on your election. We welcome the convening of the 67th session of the Commission on Social Development under the priority theme, Fostering Social Development and Social Justice through Social Policies to accelerate progress on the implementation of 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to achieve the overarching goal of poverty eradication. The Group of 77 and China thanks the Secretary General for his report under the agenda item and takes note of the recommendations contained therein. On behalf of the G77 and China, I extend our sincere condolences to the government and the people of Namibia on the death of the President of the Republic of Namibia, His Excellency Dr. A. Gottfried Gabel. Excellencies, poverty, anger, and malnutrition, coupled with persistent socioeconomic consequences and negative effects of COVID-19 pandemic, geopolitical tensions, the adverse effects of climate change and biodiversity loss, financial crisis, growing global food insecurity has been challenges faced by developing countries which have reversed the progress towards 2030 Agenda and implementation of SDGs. We are confident that the deliberations of the Commission at this session will strengthen international community's response to these challenges. Madam Chair, in 1995, World Summit for Social Development resolved to develop national strategies and to establish time-bound and specific targets to promote equality and social justice, eradicate poverty, promote full and productive employment and decent work for all, and foster social integration to achieve stable, safe, and just societies for all. Governments were called to focus their efforts and policies on addressing the root causes of poverty to provide for basic needs for all. COVID-19 pandemic further aggravated the situation of the vulnerable as envisaged by millions of people worldwide who are still suffering consequences of the pandemic. Meager financial resources and weak health infrastructure continue to impact on developing countries, while severe food crisis, effects of climate change and biodiversity loss, and famine are conditions that makes it impossible for developing countries to achieve the 2030 Agenda. Progress towards the elimination of hunger and poverty is only possible if we can turn our words into concrete action. The G77 and China propose that first, the developing countries need financial support of at least 3.3 trillion to US $4.5 trillion annually to achieve SDGs by 2030. For this, resources must be mobilized from all possible sources. For instance, fulfillment of the 0.7% ODA targets, redistribution of the 650 billion US dollar new SDRs, and concessional finance from the multilateral institutions and development banks are required. For an inclusive recovery of the global South economy, there's need for universal access to social protection as a priority. For this, developing countries need financial resources in the forms of grants and not loans, which overburden the developing countries. This may be provided by the international community through multilateral mechanism, among others by international financial institutions. Second, 8.4 million people die yearly in low and middle income countries because of poor quality health care. More than half of those deaths would have been averted if high quality health systems were possible. Therefore, developing countries require fiscal space to provide social protection and universal health coverage to their population. We encourage the austerity measures and debt repayment plans mandated by international financial institutions to safeguard millions of people in their respective countries from experiencing various forms of poverty and starvation. There's an imperative need to debt restructuring and review of austerity programs to support global efforts towards sustainable development, food security, and debt long-term sustainability. Third, the intersection of poverty, food security, and climate change and environmental degradation call for a sustainable livelihood approach. This can be best realized by reaffirming the commitment of achieving sustainable development in its three dimensions: economic, social, and environmental, in a balanced and integrated manner through inter alia, the creation of employment opportunities for all, and strengthen climate adaptation and mitigation capabilities. Fourth, equal access to quality education and lifelong learning opportunities, including vocational and skills training, can help workers to be more resilient to shocks and can create sustainable employment opportunities. It is also important to recover learning losses during COVID-19, as distance learning is not an option for at least 80 million students in low and middle income countries. This reality reflects the urgent need to close the digital divide as a matter of priority. Investment in early childhood education and care contributes significantly to reducing child poverty and breaking intergenerational circles of poverty. Fifth, the international structures of finance, production, and trade, including agricultural trade, must be made fair and equitable. Sixth, in humanitarian emergency, people living in vulnerable situations, including minorities, migrants, and refugees, face multiple challenges, including poverty and hunger. Millions of people are facing multidimensional poverty and hunger starvation in conflict zones. The international community must demonstrate solidarity in line with the principle of burden and responsibility sharing. Finally, the group reaffirms its binding commitment to fulfilling the goals and objectives in the World Summit for Social Development, especially poverty eradication, promotion of full and productive employment, and the fostering of social justice and inclusion. Unprecedented times call for an unprecedented response from the international community based on the principles of responsibility sharing and global solidarity. There is an imperative need for North-South, South-South, and triangular cooperation to support national efforts to eradicate poverty and hunger, and to realize the commitment made in Copenhagen Declaration, as well as those contained in the 2030 Agenda, to save the present and succeeding generation from the scourge of poverty and hunger. The international community should build a global architecture based on the development needs of peoples, a global system in which no one is left behind. I thank you.
I thank the distinguished minister for her statement, and I will now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Belgium on behalf of the European Union, His Excellency Philippe Kridelka, Permanent Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have the honor to speak on behalf of the European Union and of its 27 member states. The candidate countries, North Macedonia, Montenegro, the Republic of Moldova, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Georgia, align themselves with this statement. First, I would like to thank your Bureau, Madam Chair, and UNDESA for their hard work preparing for this session. Colleagues, the pandemic, geopolitical instability, Russia's war against Ukraine, inflation, and climate hazards have halted progress in global sustainable development and the 2030 Agenda. The SDG Summit in New York last September reinvigorated efforts to accelerate implementation through stronger policies. Building on our common agenda and the SDG Summit, momentum continues towards the Summit of the Future this year and the World Social Summit next year. Rebuilding the social contract through a comprehensive approach based on human rights, including labor standards, is key to overcome mistrust and build social cohesion and solidarity within our countries and between our countries. Our priority theme is promoting social development and social justice. Fostering the sustainable economic, social, and environmental development of developing countries with the primary aim of eradicating poverty are fundamental aims for our Union. They are enshrined in the Treaty on the European Union. Within the EU, we advance social justice, for example, under the European Pillar of Social Rights and its action plan. This encompasses principles and rights on equal opportunities and access to the labor market, fair working conditions, and social protection and inclusion. This includes also building on social dialogue as a proven means to advance social justice and achieve just green transitions. The EU actively promotes, Madam Chair, the social dimension of its external action. This includes the Global Gateway Strategy, which aims to support the implementation of SDGs. Particularly, the EU and its member states stress the importance of implementing SDG 8, promote sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, food and productive employment, and decent work for all, and also SDG 10, reduce inequality within and among countries. We also support a range of initiatives monitoring and addressing the multidimensional aspects of inequality, like the inequal marker and the distributional impact assessment. Several EU member states have also pledged financial support for the Global Accelerator on Jobs and Social Protection for Just Transitions. The EU and its member states strongly support also the Global Coalition for Social Justice and its ambition. The ILO Social Justice for All Summit last June highlighted the need to prioritize social justice at the core of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Let me also express, Madam Chair, the support of the European Union to the decision by our Brazilian friends as G20 presidency to put a focus on combating inequalities, which is a priority fully shared by our Union. The European Union and its member states are promoting education and training, including apprenticeships and preparing young persons for the digital and green transitions. With the EU Action Plan on Youth in External Action, we are empowering young people to engage in decision-making and policy-making in a meaningful and inclusive way. The 2023 European Year of Skills further highlighted the crucial role of education and skills development over the entire life course, with particular attention for upskilling and re-skilling. We also have a pact for skills, which brings together companies, workers, local authorities, social partners, training providers, and employment services to identify what skills will be needed in different sectors. Promoting equal rights, equal treatment, and equal opportunities for all, including participation in the labor market and equal pay for work of equal value, is one of the EU's founding principles. The EU and its member states promote women and girls' full enjoyment of all human rights, gender equality, work-life balance, and the empowerment of women and girls as a priority across all our areas of action. The EU works to further strengthen protection against discrimination at the workplace, including discrimination on the grounds of sex, race, ethnic or social origin, religion or belief, political or any other opinion, disability, age, sexual orientation, and gender identity. It is essential that services and the digital and green transitions are disability inclusive and accessible. The EU and its member states, as parties to the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, are committed to respecting, protecting, and fulfilling the rights of persons with disabilities across all policies. Madam Chair, dear colleagues, the pandemic had more negative impacts on people in vulnerable situations, including on older persons, social inclusion and right to health, as well as their participation in the digital transformation. We are committed to strengthen social inclusion and mutual solidarity between the generations. We also want to mainstream aging in all policy fields in order to help societies and economies to adapt to demographic changes. In this respect, the EU will meaningfully engage with the UN Open-Ended Working Group on Aging, and we stand ready to cooperate in the process of identifying possible gaps in the protection of the human rights of older persons in order to best address them. Madam Chair, my dear colleagues, we look forward to rich discussions at this 62nd session of the Commission on Social Development under your wise leadership, Madam Chair. And we are sure that our discussions will provide meaningful input to the high-level political forum on sustainable development that will be organized in July. I thank you for your attention.
I thank the distinguished representative of Belgium for his statement, and I now give the floor to Her Excellency Donna Cox, Minister of Social Development and Family Services of Trinidad and Tobago, speaking on behalf of the Caribbean community. You have the floor.
I have the distinct honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the 14 member states of the Caribbean community, CARICOM, at this 62nd session of the Commission for Social Development. We extend our warmest congratulations to you, Madam Chair, and to the other members of the Bureau on being elected to steward the work of the Commission during this session. Rest assured of the support and cooperation of our delegation. CARICOM aligns itself with the statement delivered by the distinguished representative of Uganda on behalf of the Group of 77 and China. Madam Chair, nearly 30 years ago, the international community took a decisive step by placing people at the heart of development. The commitments which were made at the World Summit for Social Development in 1995 remain very much as relevant today as they were nearly 3 decades ago. In this connection, CARICOM reaffirms our commitment to fulfilling the goals and objectives outlined in the Copenhagen Declaration and Program of Action. CARICOM takes note of the proposal by the Secretary General to convene a World Social Summit in 2025, which would serve as an opportunity to review the gaps and progress in advancing a people-centered approach to development, as called for in the Copenhagen Declaration and Program of Action, as well as provide the impetus for accelerating action to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Every year since 2008, we commemorate World Day of Social Justice on February the 20th. As we approach the commemoration of this year's observance, we recall that social development and social justice are essential for the attainment and maintenance of peace and security. we certainly must also recall the pivotal role which social development and social justice play in poverty eradication. In this connection, CARICOM member states welcome the priority theme for this year's Commission, fostering social development and social justice through social policies to accelerate progress on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to achieve the overarching goal of poverty eradication. Social justice is one of the many facets that impact development. It plays an intrinsic role in improving the well-being of individuals and restoring human dignity, particularly for those who are in vulnerable situations. Social justice spans various sectors, including human rights, education, housing, food security, bridging the digital divide, equal pay for work of equal value, and a clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. While the world continues to face ever-increasing challenges, climate change continues to be one of the greatest challenges which disproportionately affects our region. As small island developing states, the effects of climate change have stymied our development trajectory and continues to reverse the hard-won gains in attaining the Sustainable Development Goals. Climate change is intertwined with rising inequalities within and among countries. For us, social justice includes climate justice, and we are among the most vulnerable but least responsible. It is therefore imperative that we collectively address the social, economic, and environmental impacts of climate change with alacrity. We are at a critical juncture in this decade of action wherein we must scale up efforts to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. CARICOM once again reiterates that unprecedented times call for an unprecedented response from the international community. We therefore stress the crucial need for North-South, South-South, and triangular cooperation to support national efforts aimed at building resilience, reducing inequalities, and alleviating poverty, and to realize the commitments made in the Copenhagen Declaration and Program of Action and those contained in the 2030 Agenda. Additionally, CARICOM reiterates the call for urgent action from the international community to reform the international financial architecture and to facilitate an enabling environment for developing countries to actively participate in and benefit from the global economy. The Multi-Vulnerability Index and the Bridgetown Initiative, which have found consensus among CARICOM, must be vigorously pursued. Madam Chair, as we pursue the acceleration of efforts to implement the SDGs, we welcome the convening of the Summit of the Future. It is our hope that a comprehensive and robust outcome may be obtained which would foster a common future of sustainable development, peace, and the full respect of human rights for all. The synergies between SDG 10 and social justice must propel us to make strident efforts to tailor our social development policies to be more resilient, more inclusive, and tailored to the ever-evolving demands of our societies. We must invest in human capital if we are to eradicate poverty in all its forms and dimensions. To this end, we commend the work of the Commission for Social Development and reaffirm our support. In closing, CARICOM member states reiterate our commitment to building resilient societies and economies through inclusive social development policies. The future we want and the future we need requires significant investment in human capital, and we look forward to further engagement during this session as we endeavor to accelerate progress on the implementation of the SDGs. I thank you. May God bless you.
I thank Her Excellency for her statement, and I will now give the floor to Belarus, speaking on behalf of the group of Friends of the Family, Mr. Paul Evsinko, the Deputy Permanent Representative. You have the floor.
Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it's my distinct honor and pleasure to deliver this statement on behalf of 28 member states of the group of Friends of the Family, comprising Bangladesh, Comoros, Egypt, the Gambia, Indonesia, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Kyrgyzstan, Libya, Malaysia, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, the Russian Federation, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Sri Lanka, Sudan, Syria, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uganda, Yemen, Zimbabwe, and my own country, Belarus. At the outset, let me, on behalf of the group, reaffirm our commitment to realizing the goals and objectives of the Copenhagen Declaration and Program of Action adopted at the World Summit for Social Development as a critical contribution to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. In addition to its direct impact on individual family members, poverty endangers and disrupts family functioning. Despite this, the family, as the fundamental group unit of society, has rarely been the focus of major poverty reduction policy initiatives. We therefore see the need to place family policies at the center of the social protection agenda to address the challenges faced by the family in the area of social economic constraints, recognizing the important role of the family in fostering social cohesion and harmonious development to build a peaceful and inclusive society. Bearing in mind the priority theme of the session of the Commission for Social Development, the group wishes to present the following points. First, the majority of the international agreed development goals, especially those related to poverty eradication, would be difficult to attain unless strategies to achieve them focus on the family. In this regard, the group expresses its support for the implementation of family-oriented poverty reduction policies to combat social exclusion. Recognizing the multidimensional aspects of poverty and focusing on quality, education, and lifelong learning opportunities, health and well-being for all at all ages, full and productive employment and decent work. We recognize that the imposing of the unilateral coercive measures, UCMs, which contradict international law and international human rights law from a social justice and social development perspective is a matter of serious concern. In this context, once again, we highlight the adverse effects of the UCMs as the main obstacle to realizing the right to development, including the ability of states to eradicate poverty, as well as the equal and affordable access to digital technology. Second, we believe it is important to formulate family-sensitive policies in the areas of housing, work, health, welfare, and education, in order to create a supportive environment for the family, as well as monitor the impact of social and economic decisions and actions on the well-being of families and on the ability of the family to meet the basic needs of its members. Third, the group is of the view that it is critical to analyze policies and programs, including those relating to macroeconomic stability, structural adjustment programs, taxation, investments, employment markets, and all relevant sectors of the economy with respect to the impact on poverty and inequality, assessing the impact on family well-being. The group firmly believes that an urgent reform in the international economic order and its financial structures is the main prerequisite for the economic and social development and well-being of the family. Finally, we believe it is important to foster policies that enable people to combine paid work with parenting responsibilities, especially for single-parent households. Particular efforts should be made to protect children and youth by promoting family stability and supporting the family in its role as nurturer and educator of children. Madam Chair, this year we mark the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family, which has catalyzed initiatives at the national, regional, and international levels, including family-oriented policies and programs to reduce poverty and hunger, enhance development efforts, and help to break the intergenerational transfer of poverty in support of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Member states of the group recognize the efforts made by governments, the United Nations system, and civil society to fulfill the objectives guiding the preparations for the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family, and urge states to continue to make every possible effort to realize the objectives of the International Year and its follow-up processes, and to develop strategies and programs aimed at strengthening national capacities to address national priorities related to family issues. In closing, We would like to take this opportunity to invite member states to consider joining the group of friends of the family to promote concerted action to strengthen family-oriented policies and programs as part of an integrated, comprehensive approach to development. And I thank you all for your attention.
I thank the distinguished representative for his statement, and I now give the floor to Belarus on behalf, my apologies, I now give the floor to Botswana on behalf of the African Group, Her Excellency Gladys Mukava, Permanent Representative. You have the floor.
Distinguished delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Chairperson, allow me to take this opportunity to express our sincere condolences to the Permanent Mission of Namibia and the entire Namibian nation on the passing on of President Hage Geingob. Our prayers are with you during this time, this difficult time. I have the honor to deliver the statement on behalf of the African Group. At the outset, allow me to congratulate you on behalf of the group for the excellent manner in which you are conducting the proceedings of this 62nd session of the Commission for Social Development. We are confident that these deliberations will result in a successful conclusion under your able leadership. We align ourselves with the statement delivered by the delegation of Uganda on behalf of the Group of 77 and China on the priority theme. The African Group thanks the Secretary General for his report under this agenda item and takes note of the recommendations contained therein. Chairperson, the pillars of 1995 World Summit for Social Development remain relevant to date. Poverty eradication is still overarching objective of development. Since the summit, governments committed themselves to eradication of poverty as an ethical, social, political, and economic imperative of humankind. Governments resolved to develop national strategies and to establish time-bound and specific targets to eradicate absolute poverty. The summit called governments to focus their efforts and policies on addressing the root causes of poverty, providing for the basic needs for all, especially women and other people in vulnerable situations, including people with disabilities, and ensure that poor people have access to productive resources, including credit, education, and training. As part of this commitment, governments had to reinforce the means and capacities for people, particularly poor people, to participate in decision-making, thereby creating policy and regulatory environments that would reduce inequalities and enable them to benefit from expanding employment and economic opportunities. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, the eradication of poverty, including extreme poverty, is one of the greatest global challenges facing the world today. Although development context and landscape in many African countries is changing, it is important that African countries continue to build and sustain the momentum achieved and ensure that their development priorities and aspirations find fulfillment in the 2030 Development Agenda and Agenda 2063 of the African Union. Nonetheless, the various consequences of poverty, such as malnourishment, ill health, lack of limited access to education, and other basic services, including infrastructure, weak economic growth, and environmental degradation, continue to affect and worsen the lives of many people in Africa. The critical importance of concrete action to accelerate progress towards poverty eradication by addressing its interrelationship with social integration and full employment and decent work for all could never be overemphasized. In addition, regarding social inclusion and income inequalities in many African countries, development has not made a significant impact on the lives of the majority of the population, especially those in vulnerable situations. Many countries in Africa continue to face social development difficulties. Income and non-income inequalities have increased in many countries over the past decades, and Africa remains among the regions with the highest level of income inequality and highly dependent on the informal sector. Disparities also exist in the attainment of many of the Sustainable Development Goals, of which Africa trends behind in the attainment of those SDGs. Chairperson, ladies and gentlemen, Africa remains committed to and engaged in poverty eradication, both at regional and national plans and policies development. To reflect on this commitment, the African Union heads of states and government adopted the Social Policy Framework for Africa in 2009. In this regard, the African Group put special emphasis on AU Development Agency, that is NAPAD, as an initiative that pushed forward the elements of social and economic development in Africa. The African Group requests, therefore, that the partners' continued support for the full and effective implementation of this initiative. Adequate, consistent, and predictable financial support, as well as coherent, predictable policy environment at both the national and international levels are critical. In this connection, there is need to broaden and strengthen partnerships, including South-South, North-South, and triangular partnerships to ensure supportive international frameworks for trade, taxation, technology, and climate change mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, for sustained human development, and for efficient, predictable, and well-coordinated financing for development, including national budgets, ODA, debt cancellation, and new financing sources, instruments, arrangements, and institutions. We believe that the Addis Ababa Action Agenda is key to achieving a balanced financing approach while enhancing governance and institutional implementation capacities at the country level. We are pleased of the progress achieved in the World South Summit for Social Development in Copenhagen, but a lot remains to be done to meet our objectives in the field of social development and social inclusion and justice globally. The African Group is cognizant of the fact that poverty is a complex problem involving a set of economic as well as social development issues that can not be solved through economic growth only, but through a human-centered approach as recognized by the principles and goals of the Copenhagen Declaration. I have a lot to say. The African Group is deeply concerned of the constraints of the fight against poverty, which are rising to the ongoing global financial, economic, the world food crisis, the continual food insecurity, and the energy crisis, and the challenges posed by climate change. In conclusion, Africa recognizes that the fight against poverty requires concerted global action and partnerships. We all need to pull our efforts together and step up progress to reduce the levels of poverty and social injustice in the world. International development assistance must be commensurate with the challenges to support national efforts, including fulfillment of internationally agreed official development assistance, debt cancellation, market access, universal health coverage, credit, education, science and technology transfer, and technical assistance for the development of local human capital. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank the Ambassador of Botswana, Her Excellency, for her statement. And I now have the pleasure to give the floor to Luxembourg on behalf of the LGBTI core group, His Excellency Olivier Mays, the permanent representative. You have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I have the honor indeed to deliver this statement on behalf of the LGBTI core group, an informal cross-regional group established in 2008. Our overarching goal is to work within the United Nations framework to ensure universal respect for the human rights and fundamental freedoms of all individuals without distinction, regardless of their real or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity or sex characteristics, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and intersex persons. Our particular focus is on protecting LGBTI persons from violence and discrimination. Madam Chair, our group has consistently advocated, including in the last 3 sessions of the Commission for Social Development, for the recognition and elimination of the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and all forms of violence faced by LGBTI persons and the vulnerable situations they may be placed in. We are committed to breaking the silence surrounding the suffering faced by LGBTI persons and to drawing attention to the harsh realities they often face because of systemic and discriminatory barriers and societal biases that create and perpetuate deep inequalities and exclusion. LGBTI persons are at an increased risk of experiencing a lack of access to basic social services such as education, health, and social protection, as well as unemployment, hunger, and poverty just because of who they are and who they love. In this regard, we firmly believe that the priority theme of this year's session represents an opportunity to address the importance of developing and implementing social policies and legislation that take into consideration the needs and perspectives of LGBTI persons, promoting their inclusion in social development and social justice to prevent further vulnerability and inequality. In this sense, we hope that the challenges that LGBTI persons face will be explicitly considered in the Secretary General's future reports for this Commission when mentioning groups in vulnerable situations and conditions. Where applicable, we recommend expressly acknowledging LGBTI persons and the challenges they face in official UN documents. This is particularly important as the session's report highlights pathways and recommendations for just, inclusive, and effective social policies, in particular stepping up efforts to provide universal social protection, affordable and quality healthcare services, and affordable quality education for all. To adopt social policies that truly address the challenges faced by LGBTI persons, we underscore the need for timely and disaggregated data collection with necessary safeguards in place. LGBTI persons should have equal rights to participate fully in society with equal access to social services such as education, health, and social protection, and they should be equally included in policy-making processes that affect their lives, thereby addressing structural inequalities and fostering fairer societies. Otherwise, we risk undermining the very foundations of social development and justice. Madam Chair, to conclude, we would also like to take this opportunity to underscore that standing up against all forms of violations and abuses of human rights, as well as discrimination and exclusion against any person, is not and should never be a matter of controversy. We call for a strengthened commitment to continued advocacy on the universality of human rights and a pledge to leave no one behind, including to fully protect the rights of all LGBTI persons. And I thank you.
I thank the permanent representative of Luxembourg for his statement, and I now have the honor to request Her Excellency Ana Mendes Godinho, Minister of Labour, Solidarity and Social Security of Portugal, to take the floor.
Madam Chair, dear colleagues, it is of course a great honor and a pleasure to be here with you again. As you know, Portugal has for a long time been actively contributing to the work of this Commission, and we are completely aligned with the statement of the EU. And we couldn't be more supportive of this year's priority theme, fostering social development and social justice through social policies to accelerate progress on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to achieve the overarching goal of poverty eradication. We are at the midpoint of the 2030 Agenda, and progress on most of the SDGs is either moving slowly or retreating below the 2015 baseline. But it is our responsibility to accelerate it, and we cannot only ascertain. We are in a critical moment to give believable and concrete hope to people who are asking us for it. Economic prosperity must go hand in hand with a strong, very strong social dimension. Economic prosperity and peace depends in investing in the social dimension. We have been having very great challenges together, but the geopolitical tensions that have arisen cannot stop us. Fighting inequalities are critical for giving real people real answers and for economic growth. It is possible if we focus, it is possible if we invest. We cannot freeze just because we are facing major structural challenges that we all know. International tensions, green and digital transitions, demographic challenges, and a very fast-changing world of work that needs concrete action and movement and new answers from all of us. The cost of living crisis is a reminder that solidarity and social safety nets are not disposable. They are critical for the well-being of our people and for development. As the political declaration SDG Summit states, we must commit to bold, ambitious, accelerated, just and transformative actions anchored in international solidarity and effective cooperation at all levels. We believe, and our strategy must stand on 5 pillars. First, we must invest in children. Only through children we can break cycles of poverty. We cannot jeopardize our children. We must guarantee that we invest in our common future, which is the children. In Portugal, we launched what we call the Child Guarantee to ensure that all children have access to essential services and equal opportunities, and also we provide free child care to all the newborns. We must invest, and this is a call to action, let us make the Child Guarantee a universal driver for all of us. Second, we are investing in valuing work and workers, recognizing that decent work is the link that unites us as society and that can guarantee better distribution of wealth. That's why for the first time we decided to criminalize total and declared work. It became a crime in Portugal because it cannot be accepted. Third, we decided to focus on investment in training, and we signed a global accelerator with Cape Verde that was approved by UN that I think must be an example of how North and South can cooperate, investing in training in people where they are. This can make the change between the relations between North and South. Well, 5, it is fundamental that we honor our social contract. Rising inequalities are a factor of raising instability, and we must guarantee a better distribution of wealth. Well, we all need to act fast. We need to deliver. The world needs hope, needs feasible and concrete hope. Let us move ourselves to do it.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for your statement. I now have the pleasure to request His Excellency Johannes Rausch, Federal Minister of Social Affairs, Healthcare and Consumer Protection of Austria, to take the floor.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and pleasure to address you at the 62nd session of the Commission for Social Development. Austria fully supports the statement by the representative of Belgium on behalf of the European Union. As you know, we are past the halfway mark of the implementation period for the Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development, and we are seriously lagging behind in reaching the SDGs. Social development has been severely impacted by multiple crises. We must see economic, social, and climate policies as being in symbiosis, not in competition with each other. only then will we be able to ensure social justice and a decent life for all within planetary boundaries. Social cohesion is highest in countries with a deep trust in institutions. As government representatives, we must work hard to maintain the trust of our citizens. Academic studies stress the relevance of social policies and social services for democracy. SDGs 10 and 16 are firmly interlinked. Especially in times of crisis, we need everyone to have access to social safety nets. The COVID-19 pandemic has had devastating effects for the education and mental health of children and teenagers in particular. It has also revealed a problematic attitude towards science among parts of our societies. And not least, the pandemic has aggravated social inequalities. This impacts the stability of our democracies. The climate crisis is also a social crisis. It does not affect everyone in the same way. Only a strong welfare state can ensure that we leave no one behind as we fight climate change and transition to green economies. On the international level, Austria is determined to make a difference. I'm proud to announce that for the second time, the Ministry of Social Affairs, which I lead, will devote 15 million euros from its own budget to official development assistance. We are committing to contributing to the achievement of SDG 1 and 3 in the elected priority partner countries. Furthermore, Austria supports the International Labour Organization's Decent Work Agenda and the Global Coalition for Social Justice. Employment and decent work are essential for poverty eradication. And I would also like to stress that Austria supports holding a World Social Summit in 2025. Let me now highlight some recent developments in Austria in relation to particularly vulnerable members of our society. Regarding persons with disabilities, the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is a powerful instrument. Last year, the second Austria State Review took place. We are now implementing the relevant recommendations. Austria's National Action Plan on Disability is our primary instrument in this area. It covers various policy fields such as education, employment, and health. Better inclusion of women with disabilities is one of our top priorities here. Let me continue with family and youth. With the Austrian Youth Strategy, we have taken an important step to promote the participation of young people in decision-making for a better future. For example, we have lowered the voting age to 16. In response to historically high inflation rates, the Austrian government has introduced the automatic annual adjustment of social and family benefits. We are investing about 665 million euros in this measure in 2024. This is an important milestone. Regarding older persons, it is essential to create conditions that enable these persons to remain active and independent and, above all, to age in dignity. So let me short at least say I fully agree the statement of my colleague from Luxembourg, and I also fully agree with the statement of Portugal done this day before. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your statement. I now have the pleasure to request Her Excellency Nevin Kabaj, Minister of Social Solidarity of Egypt, to make her statement.
Distinguished attendees, it is a pleasure for me to participate in the 62nd session of the Commission for Social Development, and kindly allow me to share with you Egypt's achieved results in social protection and social development. Since 2015, the Egyptian government adopted social justice and investment in human capital as core approaches in developing social protection programs. The government exerted great efforts to identify poverty slots, to expand coverage, to target the most vulnerable, to diversify social protection services and interventions, and to make social protection systems as inclusive as possible. Egypt has the biggest conditional cash transfer program in MENA region. Beneficiaries of the program increased from 1.8 million households in 2015 to reach 5.2 million households in 2023, with a percentage of nearly 200% increase. And the budget for the program eventually increased, but this time by 1,000 times. It is a child-friendly program that focuses on investment in human capital. 40% of the program beneficiaries are children under 18 years old, especially that there are two conditionalities that the program has, which is investment in terms of education, enrollment, and also frequenting schools periodically, as well as health care for mothers and for children. The program adopted accurate targeting mechanism. 68% of beneficiaries are from Upper Egypt. And we all know that Upper Egypt, especially rural areas, are the most impoverished. 74% of cardholders are women, so it meant to be gender-sensitive programs. 28% are people with disability, and also 12% are elderly. To enhance governance practices, accurate verification mechanisms were adopted, and the system was fully automated, and extended electronic network systems were developed with relevant partners, whether other ministries that are relevant to social protection services, NGOs, still religious institutions need to be more automated. Social protection policies have been adopted to foster a comprehensive social safety net programs. Add-on programs were adopted to include food subsidy cards for beneficiaries, also health insurance, decent housing and water connections, family planning methods, 1,000 days in the lives of children, and literacy classes for illiterate people. So it meant to be as comprehensive and to work on the multidimensional level. Poverty is not only monetary. It's a multidimensional poverty that has to be countered with multidimensional interventions. We also developed equal opportunities programs that was initiated to benefit those who are not necessarily benefiting of cash transfer programs. Examples are paying school fees for children who are vulnerable but are not benefiting of the cash transfer. So we pay their school fees. Also paying for treatment of people who have health issues. We have also assistive devices for people with disabilities and also social assistance in emergency situations. As for the contributory social pensions, full reform policies were adopted to manage the responsible authority that was developed as an independent economic entity, to increase the benefits for beneficiaries and to enhance the investment opportunities of using social pension budget. The social pension budget has increased since 2015 by 300 times. And contributory social pension, also monthly contributory social pension, was eventually increased. Economic empowerment programs were designed and implemented to support in graduating young households who are mostly in the active labor age. Thus, every 3 to 5 years, people are recertified and part of them are graduated. And also to provide training and employment opportunities for those households who were rejected from the conditional cash transfer program. To date, we have nearly implemented 340,000 projects that were designed and implemented in order to help the vulnerable people to improve their economic situation through livelihood, entrepreneurship, and microfinance. Nearly 12% of beneficiaries of cash transfer were graduated every year. Still, we have some challenges in having population increase that negatively affects development returns and that erodes the results of development. We have population increase that the country is hardly controlling. We are paying extensive efforts to limit and to have sort of family planning that are free of charge in order to encourage people to adopt family planning methods. Also, limited capacity of civil servants. We have also partners that are not fully automated, Data on zakat and other social protection services are not yet well screened and well automated. Finally, social protection is perceived as an reaction to economic crisis and not as a part and parcel of economic reform and economic empowerment programs. To wrap up, investment in social protections need to go beyond a one-off crisis response and to be part of the broader and longer-term policies that alleviate poverty, to reduce inequalities, and to expand in social justice. We really pledge to exert all our efforts to develop comprehensive social protection strategies and policies that are inclusive, gender responsive, sustainably, adequately financed, and that invest in human capital.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your statement. I will now turn to Her Excellency Florence Koski-Bor, Minister of Labour and Social Protection of Kenya. You have the floor, Madam.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Chair, I congratulate you for your leadership for this session. Kenya is honored to participate in this 62nd session of the Commission of Social Development. Kenya aligns itself with the G77 and China and the African Group statements delivered by Uganda and Botswana, respectively. On behalf of the people and government of Kenya, I express our condolences to the people of Namibia on the passing on of His Excellency President Hage Geingob. Madam Chair, the priority theme of this session aligns seamlessly with Kenya's strategic vision as outlined in its constitution and the Kenya Vision 2030 and the bottom-up economic transformation agenda. Social justice is the foundation of reducing inequality within and among countries and advancing equitable social development for all. New and emerging challenges and vulnerabilities such as external debt, sustainability, create and perpetuate inequalities. It is therefore important to improve international debt mechanisms to support debt review and restructuring, and to ensure enhanced representation from developing countries in the decision-making of international economic and financial institutions. This will deliver more effective, credible, accountable, and legitimate institutions. Kenya's enduring commitment to sustainable development is deeply rooted in its history, recognizing that a prosperous future hinges on the comprehensive, integrated, and participatory implementation of sustainable development. Specifically, Kenya has taken the following interventions. The Kenya Social Protection Policy 2023 adopts a rights-based and life cycle approach, providing social protection measures on income, security, social health insurance, shock responsiveness, and complementary interventions for all Kenyans from birth to old age. The policy is a key instrument for the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, as it contributes to other basic rights, including education, nutrition, food security, healthcare, and employment. The government of Kenya has committed to expand the coverage of the National Safety Net Program from 1.3 million to 2.5 million beneficiaries by the year 2025. We will be scaling up by 500,000 households this year. Moreover, Kenya, with the support of partners, provides additional short-term cash transfers as shock-responsive measures during drought and other emergencies. Kenya is implementing a number of health-related policies to improve community health and healthcare delivery systems. We are strengthening the provision, access, and management of primary health care, financing management and control of public health facilities, and utilization of digital health information systems. We have recruited, trained, and equipped 100,000 community health promoters to provide preventive and promotive health services at community levels. Distinguished delegates, Kenya is implementing inclusive family-centered policies and programs that consider the diverse needs and expectations of families. These policies work towards promoting gender equality and empowering youth, women and girls, all aimed at promoting social integration. A national positive parenting program is being implemented, providing training to parents and caregivers to enhance their skills, behaviors, beliefs, practices, and attitudes on parenting, and to foster healthy family relationships and child development. The National Care Reform Strategy for Children in Kenya reaffirms the significance and the leading role of the family in the care, nurturing, growth, and development of children. Through the strategy, the government commits to ensure children live safely, happily, and sustainably in families where their best interests are served. Digital transformation plays an important role in promoting inclusive growth and development. We have strengthened government service delivery by digitizing and automating over 5,000 key government processes. Distinguished delegates, Kenya is creating employment among the youth through increased engagement with labor market destination countries, establishment of digital hubs, improving digital literacy, and enhancing digital infrastructure countrywide to facilitate access to digital economy. A number of programs are being implemented to address systematic inequalities, promote equal opportunities, and to create more inclusive and fair society. These include affirmative action programs on employment, education, health, and community empowerment, particularly for the youth, women, persons with disabilities, the vulnerable, marginalized, and underserved populations. In conclusion, Kenya will constructively engage and share its experiences in this session. We look forward to a bold and action-oriented outcome which should build up to the Summit of the Future, Pact for the Future, and the 2025 World Social Summit. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister, for your statement. I will now give the floor to Her Excellency Kaisa Juuso, Minister of Social Affairs and Health of Finland. You have the floor.
Honorable Chair, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful for this opportunity to speak here today in this very important moment. Finland values highly the UN Commission for Social Development. In addition, we want to play an active and constructive role in preparing a very successful UN Social Summit in 2025. The social dimension of sustainability is very broad. We need a wide variety of sectors such as health, social protection, employment and rights at work, education, gender equality and disability inclusion. They are key to human well-being, sustainable economic progress and political stability. In Finland, we have been able to make progress in gender equality and economic success through something we call the economy of well-being and care. People are our most valuable asset. The balance between economic growth and well-being is essential. Economy of well-being is based on sound economic policy. Investments into effective and efficient well-being policies and structures can support economic growth and fiscal stability in an important manner and prevent future social and health-related public costs. We want people to work, earn their own living, and to pay taxes to support the care services for those who are too young, old, or ill to work. Therefore, we also have to invest into the well-being and capacity of the people to work productively. We need older persons to stay healthy and continue in working life longer than before. We cannot afford to lose the inputs of people due to occupational accidents or lack of mental health care. We need to offer our children and young people high-quality education as well as continuous learning through life for everyone. Many times, caring for children older persons, and the ill falls on the shoulders of women as burden of unpaid work. This restricts women's capacity to make inputs in the labor market and to earn their independent income. Social policy innovations such as affordable child daycare and parental leaves equally shared among the parents are essential in improving women's participation rates in the formal labor markets. This is empowering women as it gives them independent incomes and access to health insurance and old age pension. At the same time, the national economy benefits from women's professional inputs and from the taxes they pay. Economy of well-being is a thematic priority for Finland, and we would like to see it at the core of the agenda of the Social Summit in 2025. The upcoming Social Summit can strengthen the social dimension of sustainable development and to boost progress towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. In order to leave no one behind, the summit comes at a critical time. Let me now hand over the microphone to Finland's youth delegate, Ms. Nea Nättinen.
Madam Chair, honorable ministers, distinguished delegates, dear youth delegates. We cannot overlook the societal significance of women engaging in paid work. At the same time, we must not forget the builders of our future, girls around the world. Too often, girls are forced to bear the disproportionate burden in managing household responsibilities and caring for younger siblings at the expense of their education. Ensuring access to quality education for girls is the key to sustainable development and building societal equality. The UNICEF report from 2020 shows that 1 of the 5 girls have been sexually abused or exploited before reaching the age of 18. As digitalization accelerates, the number of victims will increase and the response will become more challenging. Regardless of whether it is in a digital environment or the physical world, everyone has the right to self-determination over their own body. Is it the responsibility of each state to commit to ensuring the full human rights of girls on both national and global level? Thank you.
I thank Finland for their statement, and I now have the pleasure to request Her Excellency Natalia Elena Intotero, the Minister for Family, Youth and Equal Opportunities of Romania, to take the floor.
Thank you, distinguished guests, Madam Chair. It is a particular privilege to stand before you and represent Romania at the 62nd session of the Commission for Social Development of the UN. I would like to salute the presence of my counterparts from countries around the world. The United Nations 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development is an opportunity to prioritize ongoing and future efforts to benefit prosperity, the planet, people, peace, and partnership around the world. The 2030 Agenda and its 17 Sustainable Development Goals are providing a comprehensive guiding framework for countries and local communities, and it is high time now to speed up the reach of their 169 targets. The pressing challenges we face cannot be solved individually or in a silos approach. This highlights the importance of the Global Partnership for Development, which serves as a roadmap for sustainable recovery and structural change in synergy with the private sector, civil society, and other key stakeholders. The root causes of inequality, political instability, and displacement must be addressed. At a time when too many people feel excluded, greater accountability and transparency are crucial. Moreover, ensuring universal access to quality health care, education, sanitation, clean energy, and the internet is essential for fulfilling the SDGs. In 1990, the Madison Park High School, Roxbury Nelson Mandela said that education is the most powerful weapon we can use to change the world. Truer words were never spoken. Madam Chair, education must be seen as a process that prepares the young generation for the challenges that unfold all over the course of a lifetime, encouraging innovation, meritocracy, constructive, critical thinking, curiosity behavior, and emancipation. It is also a lifelong learning process because an engaged, well-educated electorate is at the heart of strong democratic societies. As the young people are the future custodians of democracy, creating an environment in which they feel their voice counts is crucial. We must therefore invest in the future of our children, and the best way to do so is by investing in our education system. 50 years ago, Derek Book, the president of Howard University, remarked, "If you think education is expensive, try ignorance." In Romania, education is free for children and young people all through high school. Also, the Romanian education system provides scholarship for eminent students studying in universities. Recently, my country has adopted the education laws named Educated Romania. Furthermore, the Education Ministry's budget for 2024 has been substantially increased, representing 4.3% of the GDP. Ladies and gentlemen, the world faces each day unsettling new challenges which undermine international peace and security, human rights, and sustainable development. No viable answer can be found outside an effective multilateral system. Madam Chair, I'm convinced that only by working together within international organizations such as the UN and the EU, but also through bilateral agreements, we will be able to prevail these challenges in order to leave no one behind and ensure a better future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. I will now give the floor to the United Arab Emirates, Her Excellency Shama bin Sohail Al Mazrui, the Minister of Community Development.
Guests and fellow social workers. Where do social policies stem from? Social policies as they exist today are products of our belief systems and of those who craft, implement, and shape them. As public servants, our convictions and the lens we see our sector through shapes the very fabric of our society. If one were to believe that the bedrock of social progress lies primarily through economic growth, then policies geared towards enhancing national income and empowering citizens financially become paramount. On the other hand, those who recognize the transformative power of mentally and physically healthy citizens will advocate for policies focusing on healthcare, on nutrition, and counseling services. And then there are those who champion values of equality, justice, tolerance, and inclusion. Their policies tend to be rooted in legal frameworks that actively enhance and protect these principles. But if you believe in the synergistic power of all that put together, then your policies must delve deep into every single aspect of the well-being of the individual, the nuclear family, and the community it is in, and how each one of them connects and interconnects together. Our social sector is not a straightforward tapestry, if I may say. It is a complex, interconnected, intricate web. It's a dynamic, diverse arena that involves multiple stakeholders, each with their own unique perspectives, different interests, different goals. It's a maze. But within this complexity lies the potential for profound change. Social progress is not a singular achievement, but a culmination of various factors: access to basic needs, quality education, optimal health, social justice, safety, a robust economy, a thriving environment, and so much more. It's an interconnected system where efficiency in one sector reverberates throughout the entire social fabric. But there's an irony. And let me start. Here's the irony. Public policy often forgets about the public. It relegates their participation to mere procedural consultations or sidelines them until a situation kind of warrants a reaction on social media. But we know this approach personally falls short. The only way for a mission of such magnitude to succeed is for the public to not merely engage, but to own the process and outcomes. In the United Arab Emirates, we made a delicate choice and a deliberate choice to prioritize the well-being of our society by comprehending the intricate dance of these interconnected indicators. As government entities, we acknowledge that this task cannot be undertaken in isolation. It demands a collective and holistic approach, a team effort. Picture this: economic experts strategizing alongside mothers, school educators collaborating with healthcare professionals, private sector CEOs engaging with the unemployed, lawyers getting to know children with disabilities, media gatekeepers learning from the wisdom of the elderly, political leaders consulting youth. They come together, they learn from one another, they empathize with each other, they build trust, they weave in to their own networks. They get an all-in-depth look into each other's lives, beyond the dry numbers, beyond the facts, beyond the cold Excel sheets. They collectively co-create, co-design, co-implement, co-evaluate social policies and shaping a shaped vision that is shared among them all for our nation. This is precisely why the United Arab Emirates places such a strong emphasis on empowering the public. Enabling effective engagement and ultimately fostering ownership of our social progress project, this is our approach. This is the UAE approach. It is not just holistic. It is genuine. It is authentic. It is sustainable and efficient and effective. It is our reservoir of hope. In short, if we can bring the public back into public policy, the formula will finally work. Thank you very much.
We thank Her Excellency for her statement, and I will now give the floor to Botswana, His Excellency Kigotia Kenneth Atlwetse, the Minister of Labour, Government and Rural Development. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Your Excellencies, Madam Chair, distinguished delegates, allow me to join other delegates in congratulating you in your election as chair of this session of the Commission. I assure you of the full support of and cooperation of my delegation. The government of Botswana welcomes the deliberation of the 62nd session of United Nations Commission for Social Development under the theme Fostering Social Development and Social Justice through social policies, to accelerate progress on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to achieve the overarching goal of poverty eradication. Important to highlight is that this theme resonates with Botswana's Vision 2036 pillar of human and social development. Our national development framework are also aligned to the global goals, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and Agenda 2063, which seek to end poverty, inequality, and hunger, realize the human rights of all, social security and protection, among others. The government of Botswana is committed to the utilization of social policies to cultivate societal advancement and equitable outcomes, thereby accelerating the attainment of the Sustainable Development Goals outlined in the 2030 Agenda, with the ultimate objective of eradicating poverty. To this end, Madam Chair, the government of Botswana took a bold decision to shift from poverty reduction to poverty eradication. As such, Botswana implements an eradication program aimed at improving the livelihoods of Botswana by addressing all aspects of poverty, including the policy, environment, the situational framework, and the establishment of sustainable economic empowerment projects. The program continues to assist in the attainment of food and economic security and sustainable livelihoods amongst disadvantaged individuals and/or families. Consequently, Botswana invests 3.6% of its gross domestic product on different social protection programs across government sectors. Further, Botswana adopted a national social protection framework in August 2020, which serves as an overarching policy document to guide the transition from a fragmented approach to a system approach to social protection. Four core national principles being social justice, self-reliance, unity, and the value of Putu, commonly known as humanness, guided by social protection. In an effort to accelerate progress on the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and to achieve the overarching goal of poverty eradication, government has adopted several legislation policies which are currently being implemented. These include, among others, Economic Inclusion Act of 2020, which provides for the implementation of the existing economic empowerment laws and initiatives. Revised National Policy on Destitute Persons of 2002, which establishes the Destitute Persons Program aimed at improving the living conditions of the very poor. Inclusive Education Policy of 2011, which provides for an inclusive education system that addresses the needs of all persons, notwithstanding their gender, life circumstances, health, disability, stage of development, capacity to learn, level of achievement, financial or any other circumstances. National Environment Policy adopted in 2021, which aims to promote productive, gainful and decent employment in order to contribute to the reduction of income inequality and support poverty eradication. Botswana also implements several social protection programs which have substantially contributed to poverty and inequality eradication. Currently, there are 31 social welfare and economic empowerment programs aimed at eradicating poverty, reducing inequality, and mitigating the vulnerabilities of citizens. These include revised Remote Area Development Program of 2009, which is the primary policy initiative currently in place to alleviate poverty, with specific emphasis on employment, training, social, cultural, and economic development. As a result of implementing this program across sectors, all 72 targeted communities have access to basic education, clean water, primary health services, among others. Government also continues to provide decent shelter targeted at targeted beneficiaries. Further, beneficiaries are under the program are supported with startup capital and appropriate training for small-scale enterprises and other economic activities of their choice. Ipelehem program introduced is an as far back as far back as 1960, which is inspired by the public works approach, provides a short-term employment support and relief, while at the same time carrying out essential development projects. It targets unskilled and semi-skilled labor for short-term assistance and acts as a source of supplementary income and employment to vulnerable members of the community in both rural and urban areas. In an effort, it offers short-term relief to 83,714 unemployed citizens aged 18 years and above, with an annual budget of $56 million. The old age pension allowance introduced in 1966 in an effort to prevent poverty in old age is a universal and non-contributory pension given to all citizens aged 65 and above. On average, government spends 67 million US dollars. Madam Chair, in conclusion, the government of Botswana reiterates its commitment to strengthening social development and social justice through policies that accelerate the attainment of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, ultimately eliminating poverty. I thank you, Madam Chair.
I thank the Minister for his statement. And before I give the floor to the next speaker, colleagues, I would just like to reiterate that we have indeed a long list of speakers and would hence once again appeal to delegations to strictly observe the agreed time limits, which is 5 minutes for member states in their individual capacity. On that note, I will now give the floor to the next speaker, which is Guyana, Her Excellency Vidya Prasad, Minister of Human Services and Social Security. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Madam Chair. Guyana aligns itself with the statements delivered on behalf of G77 and China and CARICOM. We congratulate you and members of the Bureau on your election. We meet at a time when the world is grappling with the effects of poverty, food insecurity, climate change, geopolitical tensions, and conflict. Advancements made in compliance with the 2030 Agenda, the Copenhagen Declaration, and other international frameworks are being reversed. These realities are cross-cutting and underscore the interconnectedness of our world, emphasizing our shared global responsibility towards the eradication of poverty and to leaving no one behind. The world's most vulnerable requires our collective, urgent, and targeted action supported by necessary resources. Guyana is taking a proactive and people-centered approach towards the eradication of poverty, creating a society that is inclusive, resilient, and equitable. Our policies are aimed at increasing social justice, creating employment opportunities, promoting gender equality and women's empowerment, good governance, respect for human rights, protection of the most vulnerable, and access to quality education and health services. We recognize the importance of addressing the root causes of poverty. Our education budget has increased by more than 60%, with the majority of education and training programs provided free of cost. Special focus is given to persons living in rural and hinterland areas. Having achieved universal primary education, Guyana is on a path to achieving universal access to secondary and free university education by 2025. There is no distinction in access to education between boys and girls. Guyana is prioritizing women's development, inclusion, and participation at all levels through capacity building, access to strong social protection and justice systems, and the mainstreaming of gender into policies, programs, and budgets. The Women's Innovation and Investment Network provides free and accessible training and has empowered thousands of women in Guyana, providing them with the skills to pursue economic opportunities towards their financial independence. Guyana has adopted a life course approach to the personal growth and long-term independence of persons living with disabilities. Government is committed to breaking physical, institutional, and attitudinal barriers to enable them to become independent, contributing members of society through significant budgetary allocations, lifelong financial assistance, free technical and vocational training, assistive and support aids, and access to microfinance. We are taking a comprehensive approach to the well-being of families through social and developmental programs, which includes parental training, psychosocial and other support for children through the Every Child Safe campaign. The provision of better care facilities for the children of working parents, particularly single parents, is a priority. Currently, day, night care, and early childhood development centers are being constructed. Chair, The World Food Programme estimated that in 2023, more than 333 million people faced acute levels of food insecurity. Addressing food insecurity and strengthening food systems is at the core of Guyana's development focus. Adequate infrastructure, technology, logistics, markets, and the involvement of our youth are major pillars of our efforts. Our Youth Agricultural and Innovation Entrepreneurship Program, launched in January 2022, has enabled 70% of the youth involved to evolve into successful entrepreneurs. As our world continues to face devastating impacts of climate change, Guyana's Low-Carbon Development Strategy 2030 harnesses our forests in the global fight against climate change and provides a framework to pursue development. The economic value of our vast forests and ecosystem services play a critical role. Of the US $150 million received for carbon credits, 15% has gone directly to indigenous communities. Chair, we know that national commitment alone will not be enough to achieve the SDGs in many of our countries. Financing is critical, especially for developing countries. We cannot continue to operate in silos if we are intentional about eradicating poverty. Prioritizing social development and investing in vulnerable communities must remain global priorities to ensure that no one is left behind. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your statement. I will now turn to Cameroon, to Her Excellency Pauline Irene Injueni, Minister for Social Affairs. You have the floor.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson. Madam, it's an honor and a privilege for me to take the floor at the 62nd session of the United Nations Committee on Social Development to share with you the progress made by Cameroon in the area of promoting an inclusive and sustainable social development. Madam Chair, the choice of the priority theme of this session that we support, promoting social development and social justice, calls on our states to strengthen our flexibility and effectiveness of our social policies. Now, in Cameroon, the President has focused on the flourishing of every single individual, and that is the very foundation of his social policy. This political ambition is embodied in the vision for development to 2035. In this vision, the public authorities are focusing on consolidating growth to make it stronger, more inclusive, and to create jobs. Strengthening social protection is considered a central pillar in combating poverty and vulnerabilities. Cameroon indeed has a national policy of social protection, and its various multi-sectoral measures have made it possible to make significant progress in combating poverty and social exclusion, and this in a national context that was marked by a drop-off of oil-derived income and an increase in expenditures on security due to various security crises that persist in certain regions of our country. Madam Chair, this determination by the Cameroonese authorities has concretely led to the elaboration of and implementation of public policies aimed at strengthening resilience of our people, ensuring equal opportunities, bridging gaps in access to basic social services, and combating against inequalities by strengthening protection measures of individuals, groups, and communities with specific vulnerabilities. I won't be too exhaustive, but I'll give you just a few examples. In the area of education, the priority of the government is improving access and equity by promoting an inclusive education and progressively expanding universalization of schooling by providing for free primary public education. Since September of 2023, following efforts by the public authorities, 360 inclusive kindergartens have been set up in all of the towns in Cameroon. These towns also have some 360 inclusive public primary schools to welcome all categories of children of school age. These major initiatives are part of national policies of inclusive education in Cameroon, which also envisions the training of some 9,000 teachers over the next 5 years and improving school governance. In the sanitary field, universal health coverage, which is expected to progressively be implemented with certain types of care being free of charge. Now, this will focus. Now, for those that are vulnerable, significant efforts have been made for example, in the specific area of social protection. The government of my country has undertaken a significant program of both direct and indirect transfers and emergency humanitarian efforts. Just as an example, the project of adaptive social networks provides monetary transfers and electronic payments to make available to vulnerable households resources to ensure access to income-generating activities and support young entrepreneurs. Madam Chair, the implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda is an engagement that the government of Cameroon is taking very seriously to create an inclusive and thriving society for all. However, I would like to reassure you that Cameroon is determined to eradicate poverty and to achieve its overall goals of growth and combating inequalities and exclusions. The government, under the leadership of the head of state and His Excellency Mr. Paul Biya, is pursuing major reforms to strengthen the social protection of its population. These are aimed at developing our human capital, and these activities are part of our national strategy for development to achieve the best possible results. It is essential to establish a sound global partnership and to mobilize innovative financing to support the goals of a inclusive and sustainable social development by 2030. I thank you for your attention, Madam Chair.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. I now turn to Turkey, His Excellency Yavuz Selim Kiran, the Deputy Minister of Family and Social Services. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wish to express my gratitude to the esteemed delegates for their diligent efforts in orchestrating this meeting. When discussing these sustainable development goals, it is crucial that not a single individual feels left behind. The commitment to this agenda, with a primary objective of diminishing inequalities, has been steadfastly upheld by nations since 2015. Nevertheless, the substantial impact of global challenges, such as the pandemics and widespread conflicts, has eroded the advancements of 2030 agenda, deepen pre-existing inequalities. Gaza is today one of the most striking examples in this regard. The disproportionate and inhumane attack conducted by Israel in the Gaza Strip is unacceptable. We cannot remain indifferent to this situation. Under the auspices of Her Excellency First Lady Emine Erdogan, we stand ready to take action to support children affected by the attacks in Gaza. Our Minister, Maynur Özdemir Göktaş, focuses on that. We are committed to our solidarity with the Palestinian people based on humanitarian values transcending all forms of politics. As Turkey, we reiterate our stance on the global stage. As our President Recep Tayyip Erdogan states, the world is bigger than five and a fair world is possible. In light of this, we invite all our partners to take action on this matter, because this is not the problem of a single country alone, but rather a concern for the entire world. Poverty is also a problem that can only be resolved through collective action. The eradication of poverty is an essential global objective today more than ever. Poverty not only deprives individuals of basic human rights and dignity, but also impedes their access to education, healthcare, and opportunities for personal and economic development. Addressing poverty is crucial for achieving sustainable and inclusive growth, fostering social justice, and reducing inequality. The commitment to addressing poverty is further emphasized by the transformative efforts undertaken in Turkey over the last 2 decades. Our government has been implemented significant structural changes in social protection policies and practices, aligning with robust economic growth of our country. According to the UNDP report, Turkey reached the very high human development level for the first time in its history, and this positive trend continued in the following years. People in need of social assistance and services have largely been brought under our social protection system. We have implemented holistic policies aiming to support households at risk of poverty, not only with social assistance, but also to provide them with sustainable income and employment. We have succeeded in significantly reducing the poverty rate in our country. The relative poverty rate was 20.6% in 2006, and now it decreased to 14.4% in 2022. We initiated the Turkey Family Support Program, aiming to integrate citizens below the extreme poverty line into the social assistance system. We established the National Sustainable Development Coordination Council to monitor and coordinate the implementation of the SDGs at the national level. Madam Chair, to address the current challenges and reach global goals such as poverty eradication, international solidarity and cooperation will always be crucial. As our President Recep Tayyip Erdogan stated during the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, we can fulfill responsibility not only through effective collaboration, solidarity, and a steadfast commitment to humanitarian values. The long-established values that define us as human beings are under severe attack. These attacks inflict harm on families as well as societies at large, directly threatening humanity, the future, and the social fabric. Therefore, safeguarding the family means safeguarding humanity and the future of all mankind. In honor of the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family, I would like to reiterate our President's call for sensitivity in preserving the family institution in the face of increasingly imposing global pressures. Thank you very much.
I thank you for your statement, and I will now give the floor to Jordan, to His Excellency Bark Al-Damour, Secretary General of the Ministry of Social Development. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We thank you and we congratulate you on your election with the members of the Bureau, wishing you all the success. Madam Chair, President of the 62nd session, ladies and gentlemen, the world is facing a continuous process of political, legislative, and social reforms, especially with the frequent occurrence of different kinds of crises. This requires us all to take the responsibility of reviewing social protection policies to ensure a safe life for individuals based on human rights. In Jordan, we are working on a roadmap of multiple objectives to include many policies, initiatives, and plans aligned with the national strategies that are implemented in an inclusive manner in partnership and dialogue with international and local partners, despite the accelerating crises that are affecting the world and their impact on social protection sectors, the exacerbation of poverty, unemployment, and inequality rates, and the flow of more refugees and displaced people. Jordan is one of the highest countries in terms of hosting refugees, most of whom fall in the category that requires social protection. This poses huge pressures on mechanisms for social protection, the infrastructure, education, health, and protection from violence. Jordan is committed to implement all international commitments, including the 2030 Agenda, the Human Rights Declarations, the Beijing Platform of Action, the Madrid International Platform Action against Aging, and the World Programme of Action for Youth. We invest in policies, strategies for social protection because they have a huge multiplier effect in domestic economy and the contribution towards inclusive development and growth and the ability to be resilient in the face of crises so that the societies become inclusive for all, flexible, equitable, and leave no one behind. The quick social changes forced us to double our efforts to have plans that are responsive to shocks, providing social protection systems that are based on a sense of joint responsibility among all stakeholders. To achieve that, there is a need to improve mechanisms of financing and investing in them in the best manner possible. Additionally, there is a need for legislative reforms to be fit for the times that we are facing, particularly ensuring environmental, water, and food security. As such, we started to improve our social policies alongside with our partners to improve social services such as decent work policies, ensuring aid reaches the most vulnerable and the poorest of the segments of the society, enhancing our resilience in the face of crisis and disasters. We also adopted the approach of multidimensional poverty to support the economic growth that benefit the poor people directly, ensuring that there is an environment conducive for their employment and enhancing their real income and improving their capacities. We also focus on developing and modernizing our legislations, our digital transformation instruments to provide high-quality services to all targeted groups, including children, women, persons with disability. We focus on alternative programs for family care instead, as well as for the nursing homes or for the targeted groups instead of the institutionalized ways of doing these issues. We look forward to develop our social protection system so that it is more responsive to the social, economic, and political changes to ensure social justice according to the highest principles possible for the best interests of the families and for a more coherent society. Thank you for your attention.
Much for your statement. Colleagues, it is 1 p.m. We have thus heard the last speaker in the general discussion for this morning. We've also concluded our program of work for this meeting. In accordance with our organization of work, the general discussion of sub-items A and B of agenda item 3 will continue tomorrow afternoon at 3 p.m. I would like to remind delegations that inscription for the list of speakers on e-delegate will close tomorrow, 6 February at 6 p.m. This afternoon at 3 p.m., the Commission will hold a high-level panel discussion on its priority theme. The meeting is adjourned. Thank you.